conference between Singapore's Foreign Minister Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan and Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong. May I now invite Minister Balakrishnan to deliver his remarks, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to an old friend, Minister Penny Wong. I've lost count how many times you've been in Singapore, how many times you have met in your various incarnations, but you know you're always welcome in Singapore. Singapore and Australia are long-standing natural partners, and partners with what I would describe as a huge reservoir of strategic trust. We tend to see the world through similar perspectives, for instance, on the need to maintain an open and inclusive regional order, our mutual belief in the constructive value and importance of free trade, and of course, the rule of law. Our relations encompass the whole spectrum of interactions and have in more recent years been anchored especially by the comprehensive strategic partnership. Some of the key elements in that partnership have, of course, was the upgrade of the free trade agreement. Secondly, the military training facilities that Australia has so graciously provided for Singapore. And just as an aside, in fact, later in this year, there'll be resumption of full training, both unilateral and bilateral components with the Australian Defence Force. Again, another illustration of the deep wells of strategic trust. Looking forward, we've had some good discussions with the Prime Minister as well as just recently concluded. There are a couple of areas which we want to explore and take further. The first is the green economy partnership or green economy agreement. This is something which obviously is of crucial importance to Singapore because we are a small, tiny island state and climate change is an existential threat for us. And I suggested to Minister Wong that we can make this an ambitious, practical, pathfinding agreement, one which will make a difference to our economy, one which will fulfill the climate ambition of our people, one that makes sense to the business sector as well. So our officials have met so far about 10 times, but they have agreed that we will press on the accelerator and get them to really arrive at a highly ambitious pathfinding agreement which will make a difference both to Australia and Singapore, but also help us in our further negotiations with other partners on the green economy. We also had reflected on the fact that during the crisis, Australia and Singapore were stalwart partners. And again, the way you behave in a crisis reveals a lot about national character and the levels of trust. And I can say with absolute confidence that Australia and Singapore stood by each other in a crisis. As we look forward, we believe there is value in exploring how we can make our supply chains even more resilient for the future. So I think we agreed to convene a working group amongst the officials to explore how we can construct supply chains which will withstand the tests of future crises and which will draw on these wells of strategic trust between our two countries. So indeed, there's a lot to celebrate on the past, and I should add that I forgot to congratulate you on your election victory, but I should also add that Singapore is very grateful that, and I stand ready to be corrected, but I believe the relations between Singapore and Australia have been an example of bipartisan consensus in Australian politics. So on that note, again, let me welcome you and look forward to your comments.
Well, thank you very much. Minister Balakrishnan for those very, very generous comments, and I did thank the Minister also personally. You remember when you were in government how people dealt with you before you were in government, and the Minister has made the effort, did make the effort to meet me when I was last here on a previous visit whilst in opposition, and we thank you for that. I thank you for that. It is a demonstration that I think the Singaporean government understands the truth of our bipartisanship in relation to the relationship. So I'm delighted to be here. Singapore is a place I know well. I came here a great deal as a child. I'm old enough to remember the old airport. You know, when you went out onto the...
You don't need to give away your age.
I know, it's all right. It's all on the internet, so it's fine. But it is a real honour to be here as Australia's Foreign Minister, and I want to thank first Prime Minister Lee for his generous engagement at the Astana today, and as always his insights into the circumstances both our nations face. I will be seeing the Deputy Prime Minister later, and I thank again Minister Balakrishnan both for his hospitality but his generosity with his time and insights. He's been a leader in this region for some years. I'm also not going to talk about your age, Minister, but we really value his experience and his insights. We've had, I think, very good discussions. I reiterate what my colleague has said, that is this. Australia's relationship with Singapore is one of our closest, and it is a relationship that is anchored in shared strategic interests and shared economic interests. We have a comprehensive strategic partnership. The Minister described the fact that we are negotiating, I think it's a world first, the Green Economy Agreement, and we have agreed and encouraged our officials to ensure this is the case, that we want an ambitious agreement. I would just make the point here that the new Australian government has been elected with much greater level of ambition on climate change. We are serious about it, and importantly, and this is where there is convergence with Singapore again, we see this as an enormous economic opportunity for our countries as well. Our relationship, of course, is more than official links. As the Minister said, we trust each other, we like each other, we visit often, we study together, we're there for each other in good times and in tough times, and I want to acknowledge your armed forces working alongside the Australian Defence Force during some tough times for us, the Operation Bushfire Assist in 2020 and Flood Assist in 2022. And I also publicly thank you for the vaccine swab that was arranged under our previous government, which was critical at the time for Australians in the momentum of our national rollout. On supply chains, I am grateful for the acknowledgement, and it goes both ways, of the reliability and the trust we have in each other as suppliers in terms of both supply chains and logistics more broadly. One of the insights many nations, I think, have had as a consequence of the pandemic and what happened to the global economy is the importance of resilience in our supply chains. And I think you described it, Minister, as we have to move from just in time to just in case as well. And I'm very pleased that Minister Balakrishnan has suggested more work on resilient supply chains as between us. We have complementary economies in many ways, and I think we can do good work there in the interests of both our nations. Finally, I just make this point. The new Australian government has made very clear we see our future in this region. We see our security in this region. That is why we will bring deep engagement to our relationship with this region, and it is a shared vision or shared interests about the nature of the region we want, one which is governed by rules and norms so that behaviour is predictable, and one that is peaceful, prosperous and stable, one in which sovereignty is respected, and we look forward to continuing to work with Singapore to that end.
Wong. Okay. We will take the first question from the Straits Times, please.
Good afternoon. Min Zhang from Straits Times. My question is for Minister Vivian. You mentioned just now about strengthening supply chains. Australia has long been a reliable source of food and commodities for Southeast Asia, especially for Singapore as well. Could I ask for some elaboration on these plans that you mentioned earlier to strengthen this resilience, given the supply chains constraints we are facing and, of course, inflationary pressures? Yeah, thank you.
Well, as I illustrated earlier, just cast your mind back to the darkest times of COVID-19. And Australians were trying to get home from Europe. We maintained our transit facilities, always available and open. Even when Singaporeans needed to return from other places, if we ever needed to get consular assistance or even evacuation from Australia, you've been there. If you think about even the delivery of vaccines to Australia, it came via Singapore. Right. Both the Australian Health Minister and I were tracking the transponder on the plane as it made its way to Australia. Food, if you again recall the past, when we had disruptions even with pork 2 decades ago, Australia was there. You look at chicken, Australia is, in fact, I suspect we just ate Australian meat upstairs just now. So, and further, when there were essential pharmaceutical supplies, again, either passing through us or from Australia to us into the rest of the world, Changi Airport, our port, remain open and available. And at each moment, neither government ever panicked, ever sought to requisition supplies or restrict the flow. And we just emphasize the sanctity of contract. So this is the foundation on which we think we should now be preparing for the next crisis, because there will be more, whether it be in energy or in food. And we think we can make these arrangements in advance, and that's why our officials will get together and make these contingency plans, because we know that we have a reliable partner. So I don't want to jump the gun, but I think this is an area which we are working on a very strong foundation. There are also, I should also mention on energy, Australia intends to be, I believe, a hydrogen hub as well, because you clearly have potential, great potential for renewable energy and to produce green hydrogen. And as Singapore is a bunkering port, and if we can look forward to further transformation in maritime and other transport infrastructure, this again is another very fertile area where we can work closely together. So there's much to be done. Maybe you'd like to add?
The only thing I'd add to that is to expand on the point I made earlier, which Minister Vivian, is that how they address you here? I like that. I could be Minister Penny, yes. Illustrated in his answer, which is the economic opportunity of, to both our economies and peoples, of the net zero emissions by 2050 objective. And it will transform, and it is already transforming, the global economy. And part of what forward-leaning and far-seeing governments need to do is to identify the opportunities in that new global economy, which is actually not that far away, if you think about this in terms of economic transformation. What are those new economic opportunities? And we in Australia think we have, there are great opportunities for us, and I think the discussion today demonstrates there are great opportunities for both our countries to work together.
So watch this space. A lot more is going to happen.
The next question will be from Sydney Morning Herald.
Question for Minister Wong. Just looking ahead to Bali this week, there's been suggestions that you're going to meet with your Chinese counterpart there on the sidelines of the G20. Can you confirm whether those arrangements are in place? Also, if so, can you say what message you'll have for your Chinese counterparts? And also, if invited, are you ready and willing to go to Beijing to meet with officials in China?
You see, the tradition in Australia is three-pronged questions. But congratulations, being very efficient. Well, look, but in relation to the First and the third, I would simply say this, that Australian ministers remain open to engagement, and that extends to the G20 also. Obviously, these arrangements are very fluid, but that stance of being open to engagement, that willingness to engage, remains our position, including at the G20. That extends to your third question, I think, which is, a hypothetical invitation. In relation to the message, look, one of the things we said prior to the election is that we obviously were going to remain calm, considered and disciplined in terms of how we spoke about our engagement with and our relationship with China. We were upfront that there are obviously challenges in that relationship. It's a complex and consequential relationship. Interestingly, I think that's the same phrase that Prime Minister Lee used a few years ago, complex and consequential. We believe that both countries have an interest in stabilising the relationship. We do maintain the concern which we have raised publicly about the existence and continuation of what we regard as coercive trade and economic measures against Australia.
The next question will be from Bloomberg.
Hi, Phil Hymans from Bloomberg News. I'd just like to ask quite broadly if you could describe the direction that you see the China relationship heading in between China and Australia, and also particularly with regards to the Qinglei case and trade barriers. Thank you. The
Qinglei and trade barriers, yes, was it? Well, first in relation to Qinglei and also Dr. Young, we have maintained our public position calling for both their treatment to reflect the appropriate standards and their release, and that is a bipartisan position. In relation to, I'm sorry, what was the trade barriers? I think in my response to Chris, I identified that. We do have a view about the importance of those coercive measures being removed, and I'd make this point, and this is a principle that is shared by many countries in the region, even if they may have different views on other issues. Why do we want international rules around trade or other issues? It's because there's a number of reasons. One is because power and size ought not resolve differences. Otherwise, there are people's sovereignty is impinged on. Secondly, it goes to predictability. If you want to continue to have a region and a nation prosper, you want a certain degree of predictability around things like your trading arrangements. So that is the position we've taken for decades. Australia has been a proponent under governments of both political persuasion for open, transparent, fair trading arrangements, and we will continue to assert that, and we think that is in the interests of all parties.
Thank you, Minister Wong. The last question will be from CNA, please.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Ministers. I'm Clara from Channel News Asia. So this question is directed to Minister Vivian. I was just wondering, with regards to the Green Economy Agreement, is there a timeline we can expect, or any challenges that you foresee you'll need to overcome in order to get it running? Thank you.
Well, I think we issued a joint vision statement back in October 21. And as I said earlier, there's been 10 rounds so far of negotiations. I think both Penny and I are more interested in ambition than in a rushed agreement. Because as I said, I view this agreement as being a pathfinder, a template for future agreements. So whilst we both want to put pressure on our officials, I don't think we want to. Do you want to put an absolute deadline on it?
Oh no, we should just put a qualitative standard
so
on it.
I think quality, ambition is more important than doing things in a hurry. But we'll get there. I'm confident of this.
Thank you, Minister Wong and Minister Balakrishnan.
Thank you.
Before we end the joint press conference, can we have a handshake between the two ministers?
That's easy.
Thank you, ministers. We've now come to the end of the joint press conference. Thank you, everyone.